Ted Mills had created a show called Saturday Night Square. It was in the same studio that the Garraway at Large show came from. And Ted's idea was to have, in the center of the studio, there was a little fountain and a policeman. This was his beat. The street circled the fountain. And on the edge of the street, there was a little nightclub. There was an apartment house, and you could go, dissolve through to the interior. There was a little nightclub. There was another room for a thing called The Clocks that Paul Reimer, the writer of Vic and Sade on radio, had written. There was another little soap opera idea of some kind. Anyway, there were 4 or 5 little elements, and the policeman would stroll swinging his billy club, saying, well, let's drop into this place and see what's going on. So the camera would go in, and then there'd be a 15 or 20-minute segment, and he'd go to the next one, and that was an hour show. It was really quite charming. Well, the little nightclub scene had a guy playing piano and singing songs. Mm-hmm. And Studs was the bartender in that little tiny, I guess that segment ran 12 minutes, something like that. And it was called Studs' Place. Well, when the big show folded, then they said, let's take Studs' Place and make a half-hour show of it. So I was delighted. I owned it and wrote it and produced the thing. And I think Billy Hoban was our first. I'm not sure who was the first director, but anyway, that became the half-hour Studs' Place that played for years, 3 years, I think. Here again, we'd set up a premise, and the people would make up their dialogue. An example would be when I would say I'd write a one-page outline, and we'd meet in the balcony of the Civic Opera building because we couldn't find another place to rehearse, a read-through rehearsal. And I'd say, okay, Studs, you've had an argument with your wife. What did you argue about? And Studs would say, well, last week she bought a hat and I didn't like the hat, and we got into a thing about that. He'd give some more details. I'd say, okay, keep that now. And the waitress, Grace, do you think Studs was right or wrong? Which way? And she'd say, well, I'd be against him in this point, and she'd say why. And then a guy who played Chet Roble, a funky jazz pianist, I'd say, Chet, what do you think? He'd say, well, man, I don't know. I think they're both crazy, So he'd talk. I'd say, okay, now let's start at the top. Studs, do this much. Stop now, Studs. Grace, get into this. Chet, get into it. And we had 4 people: the janitor, Win Stocky, the jazz pianist, Studs, the owner of the restaurant, and Grace, the waitress. And this always took place just before the restaurant opened for business in the evening, at that lull period in there. No one could ever figure out whether we served lunch or not. We never got to that. And so they'd make up their dialogue. And then the director would add movement to it, and we'd go on the air live. We never missed timing by more than a few seconds. We were sponsored by a coffee company. They kept us on for 2 years.
Well, who made that initial decision not to script the show?
That was really I loved improvisation. I loved it in music. I liked it in dialogue. I liked it, and it worked. It worked. It gave the program a sound, a rhythm that nothing else had.